today we are really fortunate to have with us Daniel Luria from Ateret Cohanim. He's the executive director in Israel. Um, we always participate in the American Friends of Ateret Cohanim dinners when they are in New York. So there is American Friends and the actual organization in Israel. So just a little bit of a background on the organization. In 1977, a young soldier named Mati Dan, who had, this was just 10 years after the Six-Day War and 3 years after the Yom Kippur War, decided it was time to reclaim the old city and reclaim Jerusalem for the Jews. And he founded this organization, Ateret Cohanim, and I believe about 18 years ago, Dan joined. We're going to do something different today, something I've never tried before, but Dan has. At some point, I want you to keep an eye on the chat box, because what we're going to be doing is going from the Zoom meeting to one of Ateret Cohanim's virtual tours, and then we're going to come back to the Zoom meeting so that Dan can give us like a full picture of what it was we saw, what, the more background, tell us about more things that are going on, and answer questions that you have. So Dan, we are so honored that you are spending your evening with us tonight, this evening, whatever. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have to be honest with you. This is the first group where I'm actually split a little bit between very excited and happy, and on the other hand, a little bit strange and taken aback, because when I see the word AFSI or anything with AFSI, my first point of call is obviously Helen Friedman, whether it be the emails, the phone calls in the months leading up to the actual tour that we've been doing for years, and obviously when the tour takes place. So actually, and I don't mean no disrespect, of course, to the beautiful, lovely, dedicated daughter, it is nevertheless still very strange to be speaking to an AFSI group, and Helen is not right at the forefront welcoming me and all of you. I'm sure many of you who know Helen feel the same way. It's a void that I have inside of me, and I'm not family. But in relation to the family of Jerusalem, I can't really say that there are that many people or organizations that are part and parcel of Jerusalem like AFSI has been over the years. And once again, I don't know whether all the participants are formally part of AFSI or have been with me on tour. I know that I quickly had a look at some names there rushing at the beginning, and I saw that there's Cheryl and Arnie, Robert and Paul. There's a few different people who could probably give the tour nearly as well as me, maybe nearly as well as me. But in any case, it is a pleasure still to be here. I'm sorry that the circumstances have brought it that we're not touring around the alleyways of Jerusalem, whether it be the Yemenite Village. In fact, AFSI was the first group, American group, that I took to the top of Bet Hanof, the tallest building inside the old city, where in fact we're doing together with AFSI a small project, dedicated, showing a panoramic view of everything they can see from 360 degrees, dedicated to the memory of Helen Friedman. That's in Bet Hanof. But the AFSI group was the first group to go with me, for example, into the Yemenite Village. So we're not going to be able to see everything tonight. The work of Ateret Cohanim is far-reaching. We're only a small organization of 12 full-time people, although given the scope of what we're involved in, from the Kotel tunnels to buying the house of the Mufti of Jerusalem, adding a Jewish neighborhood to the Mounts of Olives, anyone would think this organization is huge, but its ramifications are huge. Because, and to summarize exactly who we are for those who maybe are not 100% clear, we are like the JNF. But instead of planting trees, we do what the JNF initially did, and that was to redeem land for the Jewish people and strengthen Jewish roots in the heart of Jerusalem, in and around the old city. We believe firmly, number one, that Jerusalem has to remain united under Jewish sovereignty. No question, couldn't care what the world says. That's the reality, and that's what's going to stay. In addition to that, we also believe that Jews and Arabs have to be able to live together. However, Jews have to have the rights. At the moment, they don't necessarily have all the normal rights to be able to live and to buy in any single neighborhood, especially in a neighborhood where Jews were kicked out of. And in fact, most of the work of Ateret Cohanim has been this revival of life inside what is today called the Muslim Quarter. You're going to be seeing a tour of the old Jewish quarter, the Muslim Quarter of today, where the Jews used to live. I mean, unfortunately, we're bringing up a generation that believe that there's these four quarters, but the four quarters is a British concept. If you look at the map behind me, and you probably can't even necessarily all see it, but the old city, the Muslim Quarter, is about 2/3 of the old city, and the Jewish quarter, if this is the Temple Mount and that's the Kotel, there's only a very small area, about 1/9 of the old city, which is called the Jewish quarter. But Jews were living in the Muslim quarter of today well before even there were Muslims there. And this is not propaganda. Sometimes I give propaganda, but this is not it. There was a census that spoke about a Jewish majority of the old city. How many of you know, for example, that the students of the Vilna Gaon, this is the most unbelievable story that people don't even realize. And apropos an earthquake that we just felt recently in the north and Corona, both those things relate in some way to the students of the Vilna Gaon. Famous story. First of all, we're talking about the bubonic plague that hit thousands of people in Palestine at the time in 1807, 1809, in the early 1800s. Now, at that stage, there were Jews not much living in Yerushalayim, they're living in Tzfat. There was an earthquake in the 1830s. As a result of both the bubonic plague that killed many people and the earthquake, all these tzaddikim and Jews living in Tzfat and Tveria, they said, "Oi, this is a punishment from God. And because we rejected Jerusalem, we should be in Jerusalem. We should be redeeming Jerusalem. We should be learning and living in Yerushalayim." And suddenly the students of the Vilna Gaon, starting from 1812 onwards, they moved to the heart of Yerushalayim, which in those years was when? I know all of you know, because until 1860, the whole of Jerusalem was just inside the walled city. And they lived in an area called Bab el Khuta. Bab el Khuta is the area right near the Temple Mount in what is today called the Muslim Quarter. I know it's hard for you to see, but at least I'm explaining it. You understand? The middle of the Muslim Quarter, close to the Temple Mount, there were at least 30 compounds where the students of the Vilna Gaon lived. So anyone that keeps on telling me or the world that the Muslim Quarter has been the Muslim Quarter for years has no concept of reality or history. Now, the British, where there was had a census, I've read a census that speaks about 14,000, another one that speaks of 19,000 out of 28,000 residents, a Jewish majority. Forget just the Jewish quarter. There were 21 synagogues and 6 centers of Jewish learning, yeshivas, in the area today called the Muslim Quarter. So what question should you be asking? What happened? Where is everyone? There was a pogrom in 1920. There was a huge pogrom in 28, 29. And who instigated these, by the way? I'm sure you've all read, instigated by Hajj Amin el-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Well, he, thank God, is dead and buried. And by the way, Ateret Cohanim with Jewish concerns bought his house. Do you have any idea what a beautiful symbolic concept that is? To own the house that symbolizes wiping out world Jewry. He was responsible for the final solution together with Hitler and Himmler. He was in meetings. The last thing he wanted was Jews coming to Palestine. He wanted them wiped out. He doesn't want them coming out, flooding out of Europe. He wiped out Yugoslavian Jewry with the only SS unit made up of Muslims called the Hanjar. All true. We have his house today. We have his property today. Jewish life, a Beit Knesset, a nursery. There'll be Jewish families living there within the next year or two. At the moment, it's just a building project called the Yeshiva Hotel. He was responsible for the pogroms. So 3 sets of pogroms, and then the war in 1948. Did we win or lose the war in 1948? You're all muted, sorry. Don't answer, it's fine. You all, it's better.
We won it. We won.
Well done. Okay, Kol hakavod, Ariel. So Ariel says that we won. We did win the war in 1948. However, Jerusalem, as we know, was lost. 700 prisoners of war to Jordan. The white flag goes up. Women and children kicked out of the gate of the Mount Zion gate. Suddenly there's a physical division. Yerushalayim and Jordan. There was a 10-meter high wall at the end of Jaffa Road, for heaven's sake. The municipality was the edge. There were Jordanian soldiers on the walls of the old city. Physical division. I don't know whether you can see it, but I'll try and put it here. Physical division. There's the old city. Here's West Jerusalem. There's the old city. And everything around is really Jordan. Comes along 1967, and of course, we win the Six-Day War. And then the Israeli government does exactly that. They expropriate the whole of the area, and they create a greater area called Greater Jerusalem, thus creating West Jerusalem and also East Jerusalem, which we never refer to as East Jerusalem. And the Israeli government built beautiful Jewish neighborhoods. But what about the old city? What about the city of David? What about the Mount of Olives? What about the old Yemenite village, Shimon HaTzadik? All these Jewish neighborhoods, what happened to them? Bad luck. Finito. You can't touch them. Arabs are living, squatting in synagogues, in yeshivas, in the homes, in the Muslim quarter, in all those areas I just pointed out. So what can we do? Can we use the courts? Maybe yes, maybe no. But for 40 years, Ateret Cohanim has been basically buying. Arabs want to sell, and Jews around the world, it's not a donation. Donations are for the play centers, the nurseries, and people around the world buy. It's real estate. But oi, is this real estate? This is such a political real estate, because remember, Arabs are killed if they sell to Jews. There are fatwas, and it's very, very real. I'm sure all of you read the story. Not only that, but middlemen are allowed to be tortured. And if you think that I'm just making it up, a year ago, an Arab, his name is Issam Akel. I can say it because it was all on the news at the time. He was a Israeli citizen, and he was abducted from Jerusalem by the PA. In Yerushalayim, by the PA, taken back to Ramallah, tortured for 2 months or so. He was put in a box. He had bright lights pointing his eyes, damaged to this very day. He was hung upside down, beaten, water drip. The things that happened to him that he wrote about, you would think it's a Crusader movie, not real, but it was very real. Thank God he was also an American citizen, and we spoke to certain people in the American administration, doesn't matter who and how, for another time. But the American administration basically put pressure on the PA, and they released him to the Americans. And who do you think the Americans released him to? Not the Israeli government, to Ateret Cohanim in Tel Aviv. And just in brackets, I'll tell you a funny story. Following that, when the wife comes to him when he's released, the wife all this time thought that he was innocent and he wasn't working with the Jews. He was just a middleman. And he wasn't really a middleman. He had to break it to her that he really was working with the Jews, and she wanted to leave him. She didn't want to go overseas. We had to bring a social worker in for 3 weeks in Tel Aviv just to get them to stay together until eventually we moved them to America, where we're still looking after him, because it's a responsibility to look after the sellers and the middlemen all the way to the very end. As a result of the work of Ateret Cohanim today, there are 1,000 residents living in the old Jewish quarter. We built a Jewish neighborhood on the Mount of Olives called Maaleh Adumim, a Jewish neighborhood. People think that the only way to get to the Mount of Olives is if a person is horizontal, being buried. Well, as Judy and Helen Zichronah Livracha and many of you know, there are Jews alive and well on Har HaZeitim, vertical Jews I call them, singing, dancing, jumping, very much alive on Har HaZeitim. And the world said it would never happen. Do you remember Arafat? Arafat, the head of the PLO, the terrorist, the Sonei Yisrael. His famous comment, I'll remember it to my last days for Me'avesrim. The only Jews I will ever allow in my Al-Quds, he was talking about, were those who have been here for generations, the dead Jews on Har HaZeitim. Well, he's dead and buried with his 70-year-old virgin, and we have a Jewish neighborhood on Har HaZeitim today. A miracle. We have 21 families living in the old Yemenite village in the heart of Silwan. And I say to you today, there are no families in the world who are as attacked as much by certain Arab clans, not everyone in the area, as those families living in Kfar Temanim. But because we've doubled and tripled our presence, we've gone from 1 family to 9 families to 21 families, from 1 building to 2 buildings to 6 buildings, and the Beit Knesset, it's a whole different ball game today. So it's a lot safer. It's not like I was actually there yesterday with 35 yeshiva boys who were blown out of their mind. They didn't know Jews were living in that area. But thank God there is security. For those who have been on tour, we know that there is a security booth and a rooftop playground on many of the buildings that we've got. The government spends about 100 to 110 million shekels per year. That's about $30 million on the security of all our families. Escorts, in-house security, bulletproof jeeps, even going to Yemenite Village, all under the auspices of the government, which is, thank God, something very tremendous. So that more or less in a nutshell is what we do. I don't know, Judy, if you want to open up for questions now or only after the movie. Do you want to open up for something now and then have a movie, or what would you like to do now?
I think
if anyone's
good to see the movie,
okay,
and then have people ask you questions, because
right. So I'll explain to everyone what we're going to do is in the chat there is going to be a link. You don't have to close the Zoom. It'll be muted everyone, so it doesn't matter. But in the chat, there will be a link that will take you, that will open up another box on your screens, wherever you are. It will open up a screen that will take you directly to a virtual tour, an old city tour that you'll all watch, and it'll be very clear and the sound will be perfect if you watch it yourselves once you press on that link. When you finish watching the movie, then you'll all come back to the Zoom and we'll be here together, etc. So I'm assuming that it will work. I'm sure you all know where the chat is. It's on your bottom right-hand side. There's something that says more or chat. And in a second, that particular link is going to be up there now. If you have a look now, everyone, at your chat, which is in the bottom right-hand corner, just click on it, either more or chat. It'll open up and you'll see there a HTTPS vimeo.com. So in the next 30 seconds or a minute, if it's okay with Judy, everyone will press on it. You'll all go on a separate screen to watch it. And when you finish watching it, and it should be in about, I don't remember exact timing, but you'll all come back to the Zoom and we'll discuss it. We'll have questions. And I must give you the news. Someone has to remind me to give you the news, what's happening today in the middle of Shiloach that nobody else knows about and that I can discuss with you because I love AFSI and you'll have some interesting news when we come back. What an unbelievably beautiful, magnificent city. Look at this, the old city from above. Har HaZeit in the center of the Jewish world. Here I am, Daniel Luria, the director of Ateret Cohanim, standing at Kikar Tzahal, just outside the old city, which once was the border between Jordan on one side of me and Israel on the other. It's hard to imagine that such a beautiful city had barbed wire, no man's land, literally a 10-meter high fence. You can still see the bullet holes on the wall of what is today the Jerusalem municipality. A whole different ball game today. Well, we're going to be bringing you Yerushalayim on one of our very special virtual tours of Yerushalayim. Today, it's the old city tour going through the old Jewish quarter. More about that later. How everything changed in 1967, where we were then and where we are today. I could have started also at the Lions Gate with those paratroopers. They came in after Menachem Begin stood strong and understood what had to be. Levi Eshkol made the decision, and suddenly we are back home and Har HaBayit Biyadenu. And ever since, I guess in some ways, Ateret Cohanim has been fighting the Seventh-day War. Modern-day paratroopers, the families, the children, the yeshiva students living in these educational institutes throughout the old Jewish quarter, and of course outside the old city in the Yemenite Village, the Mount of Olives, the Kidmat Zion, but that's another tour. Today's one, just the old city. I hope you enjoyed and learn it from wherever you are, for we are bringing you Yerushalayim. And remember, Yerushalayim is the city shemechazeket et Am Yisrael. It gives strength to Am Yisrael. This city of light, of hope, of peace, also gives strength and idealism to the Jewish people. Let's go. It's going to be a fun tour. The real estate that we're involved in, as many of you are familiar with, is not straightforward. Because of fatwas, edicts in the Arab world, it makes it near impossible or very difficult for Arabs to sell. We've called this tour the Old City Tour, but really it's in the old Jewish quarter. And it's important to understand that today's Muslim and Christian quarters were basically the hub of Jewish activity in the previous century. One thing is for certain, a Jewish majority existed 150 years ago inside the old city. And it was only due to the pogroms and the riots in the 20s and the 30s that majority was decimated. Today, there are 1,000 Jewish residents living in that old Jewish quarter. There are 4 yeshivot, and during the short time we have together, hopefully you'll see some of that life. So here we are at the Jaffa Gate, entering the heart of the Jewish world, the pumping station. What is interesting to mention, of course, is the Petra Hotel. Many of you may have seen as you enter the Shuk. It's a backpackers hotel, but very few people know that a Jewish family from Gibraltar in the 1840s had their private home here. Little does anyone know that there was a soup kitchen here and a Beit Knesset. Hardly anyone knows that 30 years later, already by the 1890s, there was a hotel here called the Central Hotel under the Amdursky management, or the Amdursky Hotel. Jabotinsky, when he was in the Kishla prison, he ate here. Rav Kook stayed here. Herbert Samuel, they had kiddushes here on Shabbat afternoon after prayers in the Churva. They would come here to celebrate or have a kiddush or have the meals. In fact, there was even Eliezer ben Yehuda's son got married here. Ben Gurion's got a connection here, either a bar mitzvah in the family or a wedding in the family. The history of this Petra Hotel that was an old Jewish hotel is astounding, and maybe more as time moves on, as things leave the court system, maybe we'll be able to talk about it more. Unfortunately, there was an earthquake in 1927 and the pogroms, and everything changed and became part of the Greek Orthodox Church, who own large portions of the old city. Today, it's in court, and that's all I'll say about the issue. But as you can also see, right above us is some of the remainders of the earthquake from 1927, the cracks in the arches. But let's keep on walking towards Ne'ot David in what is today called the Christian Quarter. Once we turned off the Shuk, we've come into what is today called the Christian Quarter, and the biggest building inside the old city, used to be called St. John's Hospice, is today Ne'ot David. The first stop on this virtual tour of Ateret Cohanim, a rather unique building for many reasons. One, of course, is that Yasser Arafat wanted this building as his foothold of the old city. It cost a few $1 million at the time. We're close to 30-year anniversary. Today there are 10 families in a yeshiva in this mammoth strategic building inside the heart of the old city. So welcome to the Muristan, to the heart of what is today called the Christian Quarter. Once again, reminding everyone that the concept of quarters is something that the British actually developed. In the times of the Ottoman Empire, there were Jews and Arabs living together with the Jewish majority. Some say 19,000 out of 28,000, some say 14,000. In any case, a Jewish majority inside the old city. Today it is definitely referred to as the Christian Quarter, but there is this edifice, this beautiful building called Ne'ot David in the heart. Let's go inside. The families themselves, the 10 families, live down 3 corridors. There's 3 massive corridors, as you can see from this room. It has potential to be a huge proper yeshiva with a proper Beit HaMidrash. This is the area where some of the children actually play. There's a lot of plans, but we'll see what will happen over the coming years. Something else interesting to note about the particular building is here in the balcony. Some of you may be familiar with this particular look, but there is a joint courtyard here between the Holy Sepulchre. There is a massive edifice here, which is called the Mosque of Omar. You see, 300 years after the church was built, the Muslims invaded like many of the other conquerors. But rather than destroy the church, they told the Christian world, there is a new boss in town and we're building this huge mosque right adjacent to your church for you to understand there was a new conqueror. Of course, the true sovereign heir to the land of Israel, the Jewish people, did return home, and we are actually here in this very large building with the 10 families. That in itself is a very unique story. How it ended up being 10 families is because one of the original court rulings 30 odd years ago spoke about having 20 Jewish guards in the building. And somehow that those 20 Jewish guards ended up being translated to 10 male Jewish guards who were married to 10 female Jewish guards, and hence the 10 families. Can more be added? Probably yes, but it's a very large project like many of the other projects of Ateret Cohanim. But this is Neot David. Once upon a time there were bar mitzvahs, there were weddings here. 67 of the 70 shops downstairs were once in Jewish homes. And as I've mentioned earlier, and I like to reiterate, the pogroms of the 1920s, 28, 29, 36, 37, effectively decimated the Jewish life in the area. And we're part of this rebuilding, this urban development, this redemption period that we're living today. We're seeing this revival of Jewish life, and one of the main buildings is, of course, Neot David. Let's move on through the marketplaces, over the rooftops, through Galicia, to a street called Rehov Hebron, today Rehov Aliyah, to see even more Jewish life. Come, follow me. Some of you may be familiar with this walkway from the Christian quarter towards the Muslim quarter today, the old Jewish quarter. It's a rooftop. So we're over the rooftops of the Shuk now, and we're about to come into one of the courtyards called the Galicia Courtyard. The Galicia Courtyard, like many other courtyards, were named for the sometimes cities or countries where Jews came. They bought a property, and their people would be able to stay there when they came. There was sometimes a Beit HaMidrash, there was sometimes a synagogue, a place to learn. There could have been a medical center, usually rooms for those people, whether it be from Warsaw, that's why there's a place called Bet Warsaw, or Bet Ungarim. There's a North Moroccan. Every neighborhood overseas wanted a piece of the rock, wanted a piece of Yerushalayim. And so this is the Galicia Courtyard. Today there are 4 families here. There is yet another yeshiva here. The boys here follow actually the Vilna Gaon, who some of you may be familiar, believe that one could wear tefillin all day. If you're involved in Torah learning and religious spiritual life, you don't need to take it off quickly, as many of us do when we go off to work. But if your work and your learning is Torah, then there's even more beautiful to wear the tefillin all day. So 4 families in a yeshiva in what is today called the Galicia Courtyard. Now all of you from your salons, your dining or lounge rooms anywhere in the world can say that you have been in the alleyways of all alleyways of the old city. We are now in the middle of the old Jewish quarter, and we're coming out of a street called Rehov Aliyah, that once upon a time used to be called the Street of Hebron, because so many Jewish families from Hebron used to live here. Even today we have about 16 families and 6 buildings, a yeshiva and a kollel on this one road. Very unique. In the previous century, because of where we're located, directly opposite the place of Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, where the Beit HaMikdash was, this street became a draw card. At its peak, according to both a Turkish and a later British census, there were 1,299 Jews living on this one road alone. In fact, behind me, on all sides of me, whether it be Bet Chazon, Bet Reisin, Bet Ma'aravim, Bet Diskin, Mini Galicia, these were all buildings where Jews used to live, and even today Jews have returned to this particular area, and there's enormous amount of Jewish life that has returned to this particular place. The very first check for the very first building is today a Braslav Yeshiva Shuvu Banim. In the previous century it was called Yeshivat Chayei Olam. The very first building where yeshiva students moved into, Ateret Yerushalayim, then it was called Ateret Cohanim, is actually this particular building right here, called Bet HaMaravim. The families, the Jews from the Moroccan, the North African countries, they bought this property. And this was the first building in Hanukkah 40 years ago where Jewish boys, yeshiva students, moved in and they lived here. When we first moved in and we started cleaning up all the paints and the old plaster work, we came across a particular stone that had written on it the fact that there was a goral, that there was a raffle here in Jerusalem. Who would have known until we came along and took away all the old plaster to discover some of the original stones that spoke about a raffle, and that a particular person won the raffle for that particular room in this building. So this is today Rehov Aliyah. As I said earlier, once upon a time called Rehov Hebron, because many of the families that come here were from Hebron, opposite Kodesh HaKodashim. In fact, there's even a building even closer to the Temple Mount, which is a courtyard that I'm not sure we'll manage on this particular tour. It's called the House of Rand.
Menachem Mendel Rand was a Kohen, and in the previous century when he made Aliyah, this is maybe a message not to wait for too long, he was very old. And as a Kohen, a priest, he said to himself, when the Messiah comes, I'm never going to make it to the Temple Mount. But if I have a house which is close to the Temple Mount, as a hop, step and a jump, I'll be right there. He bought a courtyard. There were 30 rooms in that courtyard today. Today, about 1/3 of the courtyard is used as dormitory rooms for the Yeshiva Attack, and that's bet round. That's a summary of this street. Let's keep on walking down Valley Street, Rehov Agai, and we'll pass Yeshivat Ateret Yerushalayim before we get to Beit Wittenberg, the connection with Mark Twain, and the House of the View worth $1 million. I hope you're okay. You're enjoying yourselves from your lounge room. Let's keep on going. Come on.
Shalom, everyone. I'm back here on Zoom, so if you want to either press stop on the video, you've all seen part 1. There obviously is a continuation of part 2, and in the chat, you'll be able to see the website where at some point in your free time, you can go to ateretcohanim.org, ateretcohanim.org, and just press on the virtual tours to watch a number of virtual tours that we have there, and that's fine. So first of all, I hope you enjoyed it. At least it was the sounds and the visual was okay. It's better than showing it on Zoom. If anyone's got questions, I haven't seen anything in chat, but you may have questions that you would like to ask. That particular video, you should know, was only part way. So at some point it carries on down Valley Street, where we see the Yeshiva Attack, where there's an amazing story of an Arab who hid a yeshiva behind a fake plaster wall for 30 years because he was friendly with the rabbis in the 30s, and that soldiers happened to stumble across after the 1967 war, a yeshiva that was hidden behind his apartment. The second movie talks about Ariel Sharon's apartment, which I'm not going to go into, but Mark Twain stayed there. More about that if you watch number 2. And then, of course, the rest of it eventually goes to Bet Salam, where we got a building because of a mistaken phone number that Matidan happened to ring. And, of course, Bet Hanof, which is literally the tallest building inside the old city. And then it goes to some of the other buildings closer to the Flowers Gate. There are other movies there that you can watch. The Yemenite Village is one of my favorites, mainly because I just love the families there and what they've been going through. The dedication is just, it's another world. I'm not even sure whether I'm made of the material to live in the Yemenite Village, but one day I'll have, at least I have the merit to add Jewish life there as much as possible. I don't know whether, Judy, you've got any questions, or any of the people watching, if there's something you'd like to ask, not necessarily about the movie, or if there's something about the movie with pleasure, but in general about Ateret Cohanim, East and West, dealing with Arabs. The floor is yours to open up a discussion for those that want to say something. Judy?
I guess one thing some of us are interested in knowing, I think today is, I don't know what anniversary, but it's an anniversary of the Intifada starting. And I'd like to know what's the, I saw there were some attacks at different border crossings and different places. How is the mood in Jerusalem now?
Well, I think the mood has nothing to do whatsoever with the Intifada. The Arabs may be, celebrating in their own warped fashion, the killing and attacking of Jews. And I too remember the date because it's actually my son's birthday in '87, the 8th of December. In any case, the mood in Jerusalem is great, but it has nothing to do with Arabs. It's only because people are starting to come out more to the streets albeit with masks, but people are moving around more. And the big issue now is, are we going to survive? How are we going to get over this issue with business and unemployment? But enough already. We want to get out there. We want the vaccine. Bring us on. Let us get out. I mean, our office is on Jaffa Road. It's just unbelievable because they're not letting anyone into the stores. So we happen to have the Fox store is right opposite the office, and there are queues every 2 meters. There's a person standing, and the queue goes for about 100 meters down Rehov Yafo just to get, they're letting in 4 or 5 people at a time into the stores. So none of the food stores and cafes are open. You can order something and they'll pass it to you and things like that. The place is bubbling. The weather is beautiful, but not everything is 100% back to normal. The only place where we feel a little bit, obviously, this attacks, unfortunately, is still in the Yemenite Village. I'm not going to pretend that it's the Garden of Eden. It's not. Yesterday, I mentioned that we took some yeshiva boys there, and they couldn't believe that Molotov cocktails were thrown literally over, broke through. Luckily, there were no kids playing on the rooftop. You know, we have a rooftop, we have a playground on a rooftop, and we have special fire-protected treated wood to stop anything. Unfortunately, there were some Molotov cocktails that were thrown, and whatever it was came through, and it burnt the superficial grass that was underneath in 3 places. So now we have to put a steel above the wood to put a steel, not a mesh, but a steel covering. It's just crazy the lengths that we're going to because of the lengths that they're going to cause damage. Thank God that we've never had one incident of physical damage, what's it called, to the personnel, to the body. There's been property damage, but we have seen a definite drop the more families we add. And not only is it the more families, but Ateret Cohanim, actually, I told it to the group yesterday, and until they got it, it took me a while to explain it to them. We schlep sovereignty. What does that mean? Imagine all of you know Silwan. Before there was Yemenite Village, do you really think that the police went there? You think there were building inspectors? You think the government invested money in parks and gardens and footpaths? No. It was like the Wild West or the Wild East, so to speak. So if you're an Arab living in Silwan and you are treated, in inverted commas, differently from Jews living in Ramot or Ramat Eshkol or even Mea Sharim, then what would you do? You couldn't give a damn, and you just build. You do what you want. There's no balabay. There's no one on top telling you how to live or acting like a sovereign body. And the Israeli government didn't have what it takes to control and to do what's necessary in the area. But what happens when Jews move into the area? We make demands. Let us to the municipality. Let us to various departments. Start investing. You know that we did something with a few Arab families. It was unbelievable. I was just upset that the Arabs didn't want to be filmed about it. We made a new pathway into the Yemenite Village. Some lighting, guardrails, basic things. But on a main road, new steps, pavement, the whole works. Jews and Arabs together. Of course, the radical Arabs were angry and they were scared. They didn't want to be seen doing that with Jews, because when you have that, that shows sovereignty. When you invest, and now there are police there, there are inspectors, there are border patrol police. So we schlep sovereignty wherever we go, and that's probably just as big as having Jewish life. Anyway, that's the Yemenite Village. I'm not sure whether I answered about the Intifada, but I roll on from questions to answers that I want to talk about. Does someone else have a question? Or yes, Judy, something else?
I am trying to see whether there are any questions in the chat. And
out there, I can't see anyone. Are there actually we have participants, right?
I think we have, yes, we have 56.
Yes, we have many.
Excellent.
You said you were going to reveal something tonight, something new?
Yes. Very good, Dawn. Dawn, you're not. Now, you don't work for Haaretz newspaper, do you?
Nobody worked for Haaretz here, right?
No, that's right. The truth is, even if they did, I'm not going to say something which is going to be, it's a secret, but not a detailed secret. In the Yemenite Village, we have 21 families in 6 buildings. There are 2 very big things that are happening in that area today. When we got back to synagogue, the Beit Knesset, there were 5 Arab families living in that synagogue. 2 of them made a deal and they got money. We had a cover story. It was all very nice. We moved into 1/3 of the building because those 2 families sold out. even though they were squatters in an old synagogue. The 3 other families refused money, refused to leave, refused everything. Had no choice. It went to court. And for the first time in 40 years, we ended up getting back a building that basically didn't have to pay money for. The Supreme Court of Israel ruled after 7 or 8 years, they basically ruled that it was a synagogue and that it was part of a sanctified trust. Now, this sanctified trust wasn't just a synagogue, it was 5,500 square meters. That size, if you multiply that, is a huge area. It's the equivalent today, all around the synagogue, another 23 to 25 buildings where there are 600 other Arabs living today as illegal squatters, already deemed by the Supreme Court, just like the synagogue. They're in the same boat. What does that mean? Theoretically, we could go after every one of those apartments and buildings. And of course, who jumps up and down now? Peace Now, a group called Amim. Look them up on the internet. IRAMIN. They know more about Ateret Cohanim than most Jews in the world. Every single thing that we do, every pips, every building, where we are, how shocking we are, how bad we are. They got together, they helped fund even some of the things, together with the Arabs, to stop this possibility of eviction of illegal Arabs. Could you imagine if I was in an 80-year-old mosque, whether a 100-year-old mosque where I would last even one day? The arrogance, the chutzpah, these post-Zionist, non-Zionists who call themselves Jews get together with illegal squatters, with Arabs who are in a synagogue, and they can justify that? It's mind-boggling. Not only that, the Hekdesh, the sanctified trust, told the judge, we're prepared to pay money. That the Hekdesh is prepared to pay money to the Arabs, even though they're illegal squatters in all these buildings. So files already 3 years ago, after that precedent of the synagogue, went after every apartment of that 5,500 square meters. Each one is a file. Each one is lawyers. Each one is a balagan, is a story, amazing story unfolding. And they know they can get money. But at the moment, if they take money, they have to, how can they look in the eyes of the other Arabs? At the moment, no one's taking money. It's gone to court. And so far, 4 cases, and the 4th one was last week, where it once again ruled in favor of the sanctified trust of the Yemenites. They tried to appeal it. They lost the appeal. Amim tried to say that the Hekdesh is Ateret Cohanim and it was illegal. They didn't say they're not squatters. They just said that the sanctified trust has no right to be activated again. They tried everything under the sun. They lost that also. So far, and may it continue, every court ruling has been in favor, but it's a very costly project. So obviously we need people around the world to be involved in this massive gentrification and revival and renewal and redemption of all this Jewish property. So that's one track. The other track is that there are Arabs still willing to sell. And there happen to be, nobody knows about this, and I'm not going to say exactly where because it's very, very sensitive. There are other buildings, 3 other buildings, not apartments, buildings, a total of 15 apartments where there are today certain moves and certain Arabs and certain people pretending to be A, B, C, and D, getting the place ready. It's an $8 million deal for 3 different apartments, very strategic, very important, unfolding today as we speak. It is unbelievable what is taking place. And at one point in the next 6 months or 8 months when the places are ready, or at the moment we've just taken loans so that we wouldn't miss out on these deals. But very significant, and can you imagine what that's going to do to the neighborhood? Because of its position, which I'm not going to talk about in location, and 15 families, 14 or 15 families. Today we have 21 families in 6 buildings. Suddenly you're nearly doubling the area. It's more Jews, and it's nearly 100 kids just for today's 21 families. And they're all young couples. No televisions, of course, and plenty of kids, Baruch Hashem. When we hit 100, there's going to be a big simcha. Although people don't like counting. When you don't count grandchildren, you know, just keep on going. It's an ayin hara or something or other. But that's the Yemenite Village. And the Beit Knesset, the other thing I forgot to tell you for those who don't know, the government of Israel loves the fact that there is a heritage site. And the government has already put down $1.2 million of the $3.5 million deal. So all of you watching, I've got a job for you. And I told this, and Helen knew it, and Judy knows it. I'm not a tour guide. I'm not a lecturer. I've got a job to do. I need to build Yerushalayim. So if any of you know people that want to help restore a Beit Knesset, you give us a call. If you want to add a Jewish family and own something, you give us a call. If you even just want to help and make this beautiful panoramic view that's going to have a dedication for Helen, then do that also. What actions? Today we need actions. Tomorrow night is Hanukkah. Thursday night, you know what Hanukkah is about? People think it's about finding the oil. For me, it's not finding the oil. You know what it is for me? It's a few people that can make a difference. Do you really think the whole of Am Yisrael fought the Greeks? No. Maybe they ate latkes afterwards because they loved the latkes, but that's it. All of Am Yisrael, they weren't involved. It was a small band of people that went ahead and they strapped a few people with them. What did they say? They said, Mila Hashem Elai. And only a few people did it, and Hashem did the rest of the way. A few defeated the many. We say it every time. And that's the way it's always been with Am Yisrael. We're a small non-profit organization. A few people can make a huge difference. All of you know about one man. I'm not saying everyone has to be a Moscovich. No. But you know what one man is? That's one man. Built a neighborhood in the Har HaZeitim, changed the face of what did Rothschild do? What did Montefiore do? What can anyone do? Adding a family, adding a toy, adding some books for a library. It makes no difference. But I say, not Mila Hashem Elai, Mili Yerushalayim Elai. Who's for Yerushalayim? Then step to the plate. Because a few can make the difference in every aspect possible. Now, I love questions. It shows me that there's someone out there listening. I'm not just talking to Judy and to Dawn. They're the only two people I physically see. But I'm sure there are other people here. If there's someone else that wants to ask a question, because I'd like to finish off maybe with a story, unless there's someone's got a question. Not how to make latkes, although I will give you advice. It's good to boil the potatoes a little bit beforehand and not just grate them. People grate them raw. I boil them a little bit, and I sometimes mix sweet potato with real potatoes and have a combination. And tomorrow night, I'm actually even doing beetroot with sweet potato one also. Anyway, that's aside. Questions, comments? Maccabim, where are you? AFSI.
Hi, it's Tamara Edelstein. I just wanted to let you know, I sent a chat to Judy that you mentioned the Endura Hotel under the management of the Amdurskis. So anybody with that the originator there is from Endura, Lithuania, and my mother's name was Amdur. Everybody who comes from there with that last name, it's either Endura, Amdur, Amdursky. They're all they were either neighbors or are related. But in addition, there was a very stronghold center for Chabad Hasidim. So there's a famous tzaddik from there. I forgot his first name, from like the 1800s, who was very well known. I believe he made Aliyah. And so we all have a kasher. Anybody with that last name is a kasher to that particular spot.
Wow, it's an amazing spot. It's an amazing spot, and I am looking forward to the day, whether it be with AFSI or without AFSI, that the Petra Hotel, that today you wouldn't even put a second-class backpacker there. It's going to be gutted one day, and it's going to go back to its previous glory. When Amdursky was running it as the Amdursky Hotel, also known as the Central Hotel under the Amdursky management, it was written up in books at the time as the first kosher hotel with exquisite European furniture. It must have been beautiful. Rav Kook stayed there. I've got a whole email, a whole historical survey about who stayed there, what happened there in those years that Amdursky ran it, from the late 1800s until 1927, when there was an earthquake and there were pogroms. He moved it to, first of all, it was moved to near the King David Hotel, and then it was moved somewhere to Ben Yehuda Street, the Amdursky Hotel, and then it was blown up in the war. Part of it was blown up in 1948, and there's a very, very famous story that one of the Amdurskys didn't want to go ahead with suing the Israeli government or getting money back because the government was just being established and the state was young and it didn't have the finances, and he said, I would rather not take compensation and see that the government grow or something of that nature. Didn't want to put additional financial burden on the just established state of Israel. It's an amazing story. The hotel has a phenomenal history. Even Jabotinsky ate there. He was in jail in the Kishle, and he made the British get food from the hotel, which is just down 20 meters down the street, to give him food when he was in jail in the Kishle under the British. But,
yes, I want to tell you also the previous Lubavitcher Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak, I believe when it was on Ben Yehuda Street, he stayed there.
Correct. There's a famous picture when he's standing on the balcony.
Yes. So interesting.
It's possible that the Chabad guy that you mentioned, there was a very well-to-do Chabad guy. He didn't have children. His name was Moshe Wittenberg, a very famous Chabad guy, and he built what was then known as the Mediterranean. He bought what was then known as the Mediterranean Hotel, where Mark Twain stayed in 1867, and that became the House of Wittenberg, where it's the most famous building today because it's on the main road between the Damascus Gate and the Kotel, where Ariel Sharon bought his apartment. There's a very big flag there and a menorah. We take all groups there. Unfortunately, as you remember, Judy, Menachem Lavi was murdered when he came down there. So I'm not sure if that's the Chabad guy you're referring to, but he's probably the most famous Chabad guy that owned a lot of property in and outside the old city, Wittenberg.
So you're saying who owns the Petra, that place today?
Okay. So now you're getting onto something. If I tell you too much, I'm going to have to kill you. I mean, but it's one of those things. I have to be careful what we say. It's obviously still in courts, but so far it's been in courts for 11 years or 15 years. Millions of dollars changed hands to the Greek Orthodox Church from, let us put it in inverted commas, from Jewish concerns. That's all we have to know. Jewish concerns managed to buy both hotels from the Greek Orthodox Church, who did officially own them. Imperial and Petra. As soon as you come into the Jaffa Gate, as you saw on the video, the Greek Orthodox Church, when they found out about it, even though it was signed officially by certain people, I'm not going to go into the details, they tried to cancel the deal. They tried to give back the money, say that it wasn't a proper deal. They got rid of the patriarch because they thought the patriarch was involved. He wasn't involved. He sued the Jewish concerns. The new patriarch sued the second concerns. Each patriarch sued the other. One was scared that he was going to be killed by the other people in the church. So the first Greek patriarch didn't leave his apartment for 8 years. They brought him food in a basket that they brought through a window because he was scared to be poisoned by the food from the church. Someone could do a Hollywood movie about what's going on here with regards to Greek Orthodox. Anyway, it went to court, and so far
that church land in Jerusalem.
One second. I'll come to the question in a second. Let me just finish what I wanted to say. So it went in court, and so far every court ruling has ruled that Jewish concerns, that it's all kosher, it's all above board. The church owns a fortune in court costs. They've lost the appeal. They're still trying to appeal certain things. And so far, basically, the courts have ruled, including the Supreme Court, that it's owned by Jewish concerns. The reason why you and I are not having a kosher cup of coffee there is because there is a separate legal track against the management company that had an arrangement with the Greek Orthodox Church. So there's the ownership and there's the management company. And I can't say too much about that because it's currently in court. All I will say is the Arab management company are not in a good position. And God willing, very shortly, and that very shortly could be a year or less, it could be 2 years, no one knows, but the day will come where we are going to see both hotels properly in Jewish hands and having a kosher cup of coffee. There was someone that wanted to ask something. If you're not asking a question, please mute yourselves, and only those who want to speak should unmute themselves. There was a guy, I heard a man's voice that wanted to say something.
I think, was that Colin? Okay, I'm not really sure how people are unmuting themselves. I have everybody on mute. So if you want to ask a question, please let us know in the chat.
Well, if there's no questions, Judy, with your permission, then can I finish off with the story? Unless there's some.
I would have more questions.
I have a question.
Hi, Daniel. I've got a question.
Sure, Colin. Yes, Colin.
Right, let's go back to the Yemenite Village. When was the Yemenite Village established? By whom? When did the people leave? And when did they return?
Wonderful questions. I will answer every one of the questions you just asked. However, I also suggest that following this Zoom meeting, you all at some point go to ateretcohanim.org, and you click on the top there for virtual tours, or Judy can forward you the link directly, and there is actually a whole half-an-hour virtual tour of the Yemenite village. But in a nutshell, it was established in 1882 when there wasn't a single Arab living in the area. It is opposite Ir David on the other side of the valley that the Arabs wrongly call Silwan. It became a Yemenite village. My daughter just walked by and made a funny face, and that's why I'm smiling, not because of the Yemenite village. In any case, At its peak, there were 144 Yemenite families living there. And even though some Arabs protected some of the Jews in the riots of 28, 29, there were some Hebron families, wild Michiganders, that turned up to the area and made life intolerable for the Jews. And in August 1938, the British, the useless, horrible British, who basically destroyed many of the Jewish neighborhoods, physically evicted the Jewish families of there. Although there are written promises that the Jewish refugees can return, it's usually in my pocket pants 24 hours a day. But the truth is, I've actually put on track pants now and not my regular pants, so I don't have it on me. But there is a letter where it's written there, the Jewish refugees are able to return to their homes. A British recognition that it was Kfar Temanim, Shiloach, before it came Silwan. And that happened in August of 1938. From August of 1938 till 2004, when Ateret Cohanim brought Jewish life back there, Silwan destroyed buildings, Beit Knesset hidden behind illegal building, and we've gone back there. More of that story, watch the video, and don't forget to donate something to the Yemenite Village.
Okay, I think we're going to put all the links into the chat box. So if you go into the chat box, you can pick up the links, or you can go to ateretcohanim.org and go to virtual tours, and you will find all the tours.
It's probably the easiest thing to do would actually be to do that, because once we finish the Zoom, the chat's going to go, but ateretcohanim.org will always be there that anyone can just go to, and the top right-hand corner is the virtual tours. Do you want me to say the story, or does someone else wanted to ask a question?
Wait, can I ask a question?
You know what?
Yes, Gabrielle. Yes, Gabriella.
Are there like lists of people who want to live in all these places when you get the permission? Like once you get permission for like 15 families, are there people like waiting to come?
Okay, it's a very good question. But first of all, just to correct you, we don't need permission from anyone. If an Arab sells and a Jew buys, there's no permission required. You just move in. The only time permission is required is if we are building a new neighborhood and you need permission from the various building committees at the municipality or upper level, like we build with Maaleh Adumim, the Jewish neighborhood there, or that we want to build in Kidmat Zion further to the east. That requires permission or the okay from various government authorities. But if someone is selling and you're just buying a property, whether it be through a middleman or not through a middleman, no permission is needed. That's first of all. But to answer your specific question, there's no question and no problems ever with families moving in. We have lists of people ready to move in. It's not free. They're paying rents. Of course, the rent is Avia. It's only $6 a square meter. So if you're living in a 60 square meter, a 600 square foot small apartment or 1,000 square foot apartment, you're only paying $600 for that 1,000 square meters, for example, per month. It's not a lot of money. That's not the reason they live there, but there are lists of families ready to move in at a drop of a hat. Never a question. I always tell people there is what we call the Jerusalem cake. Or, you know what? It's Hanukkah. There is a Jerusalem latke. The latke, you need ingredients. What are the ingredients to make a latke? We know there's potatoes, there's oils, etc. There's ingredients. What is the ingredients for the Jerusalem latke, the Jerusalem cake? You need the Arab seller. You need the Jewish buyer and the Jewish person to live there. There's no shortage of Jews living who want to live there. There's no shortage of Arabs that want to sell. Today, the issue is only money. Money to be invested to change the face of Jerusalem. That's the answer to your question, Gabriella. Although it's...
Can I just ask another question?
Thank you.
I'm not on mute, but I see Gabriella. Are most of the people who move into those places former yeshiva students from Ateret Cohanim?
We have a yeshiva. We have a few yeshivas under our auspices, but we don't raise money for any of the yeshivas. There is a yeshiva called Ateret Yerushalayim. There's a Braslav yeshiva. They run themselves. The people who move into these places are exceptionally ideological, and at the moment they happen to all be religious. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't non-religious ideological people, but they're not the people that approach Ateret Cohanim who want to move in. We usually only take families or young couples, depending on the situation. And basically, they come usually from religious backgrounds, not necessarily from the Yeshiva Attack Yerushalayim or from the yeshivas that are there. They're from all over the country that see themselves as shlichim, as pioneers at the forefront, as people holding on to Yerushalayim. They are seriously the facts and the Jewish presence that are basically holding on to Yerushalayim today. Because imagine if there wasn't one single Jew there, who knows what the left wing would have already done. In fact, Barak, the genius Prime Minister Barak, do you have any idea what he offered Arafat Yamach Shemo in the year 2000? 5 of the 7 gates of the old city, the Holy Basin, the corridor to Abu Dis. Just imagine. So thank God it's not like that, and we have all these Jewish facts on the ground and Jewish presence. It's phenomenal. So
Okay. Can we wrap it
that's
up?
basically the story. Yeah, let's wrap it up maybe with a little story. And I do apologize for to Cheryl and Paul and Roberts and Arnie and those others that may have been on tour before. 40 years ago, the young Mati Dan, and basically Ateret Cohanim started 40 years ago in Chanukah. The 6th night of Chanukah, the first yeshiva students and families moved into Bet Amarabim, but that's aside. So close to 40 odd years ago, a 25-year-old guy, Mati Dan, young guy, 25 years old, went to the JNF to get them involved in trying to buy back Jerusalem. They've got money, they've got connections. What did this young guy got except for an ideal to go back to buy back Jerusalem? And then it was only the Muslim quarter, the old Jewish quarter. He sits with some big guy at the JNF who probably thought he was a Michiganer. What do you mean buying back property in the Muslim quarter? The guy said to him, ideologically, we're with you, but I don't think that we can do it because our American and British and French donors, it's a bit too political. But how about I put you in touch with an Arab who does work for the JNF and helps them in various things. Maybe he'll help you find Arabs that want to sell. The guy, Mati Dan, didn't follow it up. And the guy from the JNF didn't keep on calling to give him the number. And it was all forgotten. 2 years later, or 2.5 years later, Mati Dan was engaged to his wife. And he had to meet her at the central bus station in Jerusalem. So he goes to the Jaffa Gate. You know, there's a taxi stand. There's always been a taxi stand there with Arab drivers. It's okay to take them, but ask for the meter. In any case, there were Arab drivers there. One guy didn't want to take him. He was waiting for an American tourist. Another guy was having a cup of coffee. He didn't want to take him. And the third Arab driver, taxi driver, got angry because Mati Dan put his luggage in the vehicle before the driver said he would take him. And he got angry that he was already assuming that he would take him. So 3 Arab drivers don't take Mati Dan to the central bus station to meet his fiancée. He doesn't know what to do. He's running out. He runs out of the Jaffa Gate to the road down below. And he stops a taxi that looked a bit different in those years. We're talking 35 years ago. He stops a taxi. He thought it was a Jewish driver. He gets in, he goes, oh, these damn Arab taxi drivers should be driven out of this country. But who picked him up? Another Arab. And the guy says, everybody except for me. He goes, yes, everybody except for you. Thank you very much for taking me. I appreciate it. No, you understand nothing. And then this Arab takes out a gun from his glove box. So Mati Dan is in the middle of Jerusalem with this Arab driver with a gun, and the Arab driver says, don't worry, I work with the secret police, the Israeli government, I work with the Shabak, I work with the municipality, the JNF. You work with the JNF? Mati says, what do you do for the JNF? I make lots of money off you Jews. I'm middleman for JNF. They worked out that this was the Arab, the only Arab that works for the JNF. This was the Arab who we should have met a few years beforehand, that he's meeting my chance in the taxi. And then this Arab says, you know, you Jewish people, you don't love Jerusalem. You don't love. You say Lashana Habab Yerushalayim, but you don't really love Jerusalem. I go JNF, I say I have property in Jerusalem, JNF don't buy. You don't love Jerusalem. So Mati Dan says, listen, anytime you've got a property, you come to me and I'll give you, let's make a contact. He gave him his name on a piece of paper. He gave him a little siddur or tehillim. He says, remember me, help me buy back Jerusalem. This Arab helped us buy 11 buildings, 11. Inside the old Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter today, and 40% of Ir David that used to be part of Ateret Cohanim, today a separate organization, this Arab was responsible. But 9 years later, after this first chance meeting in the taxi, the Arabs found out who was the Arab middleman selling all the properties to the Jews. They sent 4 Arabs to his house to shoot him up. He was sitting on the couch in his house. They barge through the door. They come in, 5 bullet holes, shoulder, heart, and 3 in his stomach. 5 bullet holes in his upper torso. He should have died on the spot, straight through the heart. He was rushed to hospital. The doctors could not believe what they saw. First of all, they thought he was a Jew because they pulled out of his pocket, and don't ask why. No one really knows why. 8 years later, on that night, he happened to have the tehillim that Mati gave him was in his pocket right here. The blood from the bullet that hit him in the top dripped down all over the top of the tehillim. The bullet from the top dripped down was all over the top of the Tehillim. It's hard for you to see, but that's actually blood that's dried up over the top. The one that should have gone through his heart doesn't penetrate the Tehillim. It goes through part of the Tehillim and it ends up reaching a spot. The Arabs, first of all, they kiss Matidan, they kiss the Tehillim, they take it back to their house and they frame it. And Matidan is desperate to get the Tehillim back, to tell people, to show people. And the Arabs blanketly refuse for a whole year. Eventually, Mati kept on going over and over, and the Arabs said, okay, I give it back to you on one condition. You buy me another Tehillim, but this time please make it very, very thick. So he had to find a small, thick Tehillim book just to give the Arabs to make them happy. Matidan has got that Tehillim. Now, none of you can see on the Zoom, but basically the Arabs had opened it up, and the pasuk that it reached in Pei Daled, the pasuk that it reached, the words say as follows, and you can look it up there. It says, Libi ubesari yeranenu el kel chai, which means my heart and my flesh will rejoice to a living God. That is the pasuk that a bullet partially reached, or reached in a Tehillim, that happened to be in an Arab pocket, that happened to be the same Arab that he met in taxi beforehand. There are stories that unfold here. There's a bigger picture unfolding in every single acquisition. And it doesn't make a difference if it's one man Matidan or a small group of Ateret Cohanim with AFSI, with a few small group of people, can change the face of Jerusalem. Hashem opens up the door. We just have to walk through it. I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you have learned something. Please follow up things with Judy, with AFSI. Let's make this beautiful project, at least. It's a simple, small project for Helen, something nice and Betanov. Those who want to do more, with pleasure. And toda rabah to all of you. Judy, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Toda rabah, Dan. This was really terrific. I think everybody was just mesmerized, and we could listen to you for, well, we usually do, listen to you for hours. I hope maybe we can do this again. And in the meantime, just Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach to everybody.
Chag Sameach to everyone.
Joining us.
Chag Sameach. Remember my tips for the latkes. Don't eat too many because there's a lot of oil. And if you do eat, exercise afterwards. Chag Urim Sameach to you Maccabim of today.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So Daryl, nice seeing you again.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Eileen, everyone.
Chag Sameach, Daniel.
Eric also, Shalom, Chag Sameach. Kol Tuv to everyone.
Chag Sameach.
Linda also, okay.
Do you remember coming to my house?
Linda Harari, I think I did. Yes.
My husband Mark was on safari with Rabbi Jacob Rubenstein.
Okay. Well, I have to come back again. If it wasn't for Corona, I'd be in America this time of year, always around Hanukkah time, because it's the year that we moved in 40 years ago. But at the moment, I'm not flying anywhere and speaking from far to everyone. But we can still help build Jerusalem no matter where we are. But
Amen. Beautiful.
Amen.
Chazak to you. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach.
Okay. Shalom
Thank you so much.
L'kulam. I'm going to close this off now. Everybody, great to see you all. Hope to see you again soon.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
All right. Hello, Dave.